little review of yesterday, a little introduction to today, and practice. Yesterday we talked about a constitutional teaching of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedic literature, an essential precept that is equivalent to understanding like writing. You can't read unless you know how to write, unless you know the principles of grammar, spelling, and so on. Similarly, the most basic, fundamental principle of spiritual life, it's okay, it's fine. Huh? No, it's all right. The most basic and constitutional aspect of spiritual life, and I'm talking not just even about Bhagavad Gita, but spiritual life is to know who you are and to know who you're not. It's like, I want to go somewhere. Well, where do you want to go? Unless you know where you're going to go, what direction you're going to turn out of the garage. So, and unfortunately, this is something that you see is, for the most part, in terms of religions, philosophies, yoga systems, this clear concept of actually, I am a conscious spiritual being within this body, who is different than this body, is absent. And therefore, generally what you have is people who have faith, which is good, but they don't have the real constitutional ingredient of knowledge, and very fundamental, essential knowledge, without which you just can't go forward. So this is what we discussed yesterday, recognizing that our real identity is the conscious being, the spirit soul within the body, the person who's talking right now. My tongue is not talking, my vocal cords are not talking. What's talking is actually the soul, and these are instruments to facilitate a sound vibration, but communication is coming from the soul. And my tongue may be here, and my vocal cords may be here, but if my soul is not in this body, it's not going to be talking. And if it is, then you've got problems. Then it'll be a ghost who's talking, it'll be another. So, that was what we discussed yesterday. Who am I? Not just in terms of religion, but in terms of knowing where I'm going in life. What am I going to study? What is going to be my profession? What is the purpose for which I'm here? It's good to have some concept that there's some purpose to life other than just dying or working hard. So, I'm not this body. Because we start off with that, because that's generally what we're identifying with. We identify with what we see, what we feel, what we can touch. And this other thing is very subtle, it's very sublime, and it takes a little use of the intelligence, it takes some insight to actually recognize who we are. And unfortunately, in our modern technological world, thinking isn't something that's very popular. That's why you have computers, so you don't have to think. So actually, to be taught how to think, to be actually introspective, because people who think ask this question, okay, who am I? Why am I suffering? Is there a purpose to life? Where are we all going? Why do I have to be living in a consumer society that's destroying the world and itself? Is there anything better? So there are thinking people, but it takes more than speculation to answer these questions. It requires absolute answers. And absolute answers, and I'm going to lead into the next part of the introduction, absolute answers don't come from the mind. They come from the absolute truth. And unless we have connection with the absolute truth, then we can't really get absolute. Absolute answers are real answers. They're flawless, they're perfect, they're complete, they work in all times, in all places, in all circumstances. So when I first started reading the Bhagavad Gita, and which was a long time ago, the first thing that struck me in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita is that Srila Prabhupada was explaining to me how Krishna is God by quoting Krishna. That's like asking me whether I'm an honest person. Well, what am I going to say? No. So I couldn't quite relate to this, and Srila Prabhupada kept referring to the authenticity of the statements of Bhagavad Gita on the basis of the Bhagavad Gita. And after some time, it sort of clicked to me that I'm being introduced to a different system of knowledge. And we touched upon this yesterday. Because I was educated, as all of you are educated, in an empiric system. I was very much in that mold by being trained as an engineer, that we learn things according to the limits of our sensual, intellectual capacity, and that's how we learn things. This is called empiricism. It is that you sort of acquire knowledge by your own resources. Now that's not exactly how we learn. That's how some people learn. Most people don't learn like that. Most people learn in a different way from other people who learn like that. So how is it that I learned? Well, I sat in a classroom, and my teachers told me the way things are, that some empiricists have worked things out. So I was studying quantum mechanics and Heisenberg uncertainty principle. I would just learn, this is the way it is, these are the experiments. The experiments were way too sensitive, too complex, too expensive for everyone in the classroom to do, so we just accepted it the way it is. And all of you accepted so many things the way it is, or supposed to be. So this is actually how we're accepting knowledge, and there are many examples of this, is that we accept knowledge from a higher source. Well, the only problem is that as I went through, especially, I started sort of thinking when I was in high school and then in university, especially in university, how I was shown how theories kept being revamped. And at a certain point, especially when I started coming in contact with Krishna consciousness, that's the question, if you know something, then why is it that you have to revamp your theory? How can you revamp something that you know? Is it right? Something all of a sudden became more right. It's like, I don't know, mango was right and now it became more right. So no, actually, well, it was incomplete. We didn't really have quite the right explanation. And even in explaining, for instance, the laws of physics, well, we came to the conclusion that Newton didn't have the whole picture. Newtonian physics doesn't explain everything the way it is. You have to have quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics doesn't fully explain things the way they are. And there's constantly a revision of different types of explanations for why things are. Now, in an honest world, you say, actually, we didn't know. And there's a good chance that what we're telling you right now isn't a complete story either. We may still not know. So this is the problem with us approaching knowledge is that we have, generally we call, 4 setbacks. Now I only have 2 hands, and we'll use red. Can you see the red?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have 4 main defects, and these defects are the following. We have, number 1, and I'll just write it short, imperfect senses. If I talk very quietly, you can't hear me in the back. A dog could hear me, but you can't hear me. Then, because our senses are not perfect. And a dog, you know, these dogs, they can smell anything from a mile away. That's why they use these sniffer dogs for bombs, to detect bombs. So the information, therefore, that our senses give are not really perfect. And you can do so many experiments. You probably did it when you were a child. I'm just looking, I think these are only 1 tap water taps. 1 faucet water taps. In Canada, we had 2 faucet water taps, and that wasn't good for the water bill, because you turn on the hot, you turn on the cold, and you run your hands between them, and then you can't tell the difference. And standing there, why are you running the water? And you're, under certain conditions, your hands can't tell you which is the hot one, which is the cold one. So you get incomplete information, imperfect senses. We have the tendency to be illusion, and not the tendency, we are illusion, and one of the illusions is that we're this body. I'm not going to belabor that. We discussed all that yesterday and introduced that today. Imperfect sense, and we have the tendency to cheat. Not meant to be insulting in any way, but it's just natural. As I mentioned earlier, we go to school to learn something, only to discover later on that what we learned wasn't actually what you should have learned. You should have learned another version of it. That's called cheating. So, similarly, just the general principle, are there any educators in here? I don't want to. All right, Srila Prabhupada would call teachers cheaters. Because what's the principle of teaching? What are you meant to, are you simply meant to give information about who knows what? Arithmetic, biology. The real teacher is someone who tells you what the purpose of life is. That's what teaching is. And a real teacher is a real example of how good life is going to be when you learn everything that I'm teaching you. So tendency to cheat, and the 4th one, or imperfect sense, illusion, cheating, and making mistakes. So we make mistakes. I just made one. I couldn't remember the 4th one. So, because we're limited. So we do make mistakes. We make small mistakes, we make big mistakes. But all of these things mean that empiric knowledge has these stumbling blocks. We become limited as a result of these, and the completion of our knowledge is blocked. It doesn't mean that we don't know anything. We do know things. But what we know is not necessarily the whole picture. We know things about this world, but do we know everything about this world? We're trying to, but we don't. Otherwise, why are we always so proud of how science is marching forward into new frontiers? New frontiers means you don't know where you are. You don't know so many things. That's what a new frontier is. Okay, so this science of learning from others is, as I mentioned yesterday, called avarohapanta. It's just like the word avatar. Knowledge that comes down. Now, knowledge comes down from our teachers, but the problem is our teachers are not perfect sources for these reasons, and they're part of a system that actually institutionalizes the limitations of all these shortcomings. But what if there's a perfect source? And who is the perfect source? God is the perfect source. Okay, but how do you know that Krishna is God? Of course, that's what we'll talk about today. And how do you know that Bhagavad Gita is a perfect source? You put it to the test. Everything ultimately has experimental verification, and that's what science is. So remember, what you learned in school is that science has three principles. And it's extraordinary that people don't come to realize that science is not scientific. Number one is that you have a hypothesis. Number two, you do an experiment to verify that hypothesis, and then ultimately you're going to come to your conclusion. When we're talking about Bhagavad Gita you can take also as actually being this hypothesis, and you put it all to the test. You put it all to the experiment, and you see that you get the result. So religion is also scientific, and this sort of false dichotomy that, well, religion is about faith, and we're talking about science, but no. First of all, science is not necessarily very scientific. One of the hypotheses it starts out with is you can actually understand reality through your senses. Now that's faith, and that's blind faith. That's not even reasonable faith, because the other natural consequence is you can't understand reality by your senses. But who says you're starting off like this? You're just sort of blocking out the whole other vision of a very rational, reasonable approach to science, is that, well, maybe we can understand some things, but we're not going to be able to understand everything. And the more, this is the common idiom, the more we know what we don't know. And I had to go to university for that, just to not know more and more things. So here we have another process where you're actually getting knowledge from a perfect source. And of course, you have to do the experiment. And the difference here is that there's no guinea pigs, there's no mice, there's no, I don't know what other poor creatures that experiments get done on. You have to be the guinea pig. So if you want to know whether this system works, you have to do it personally. It's not on someone else. Someone else can only tell you, I did it and it works. But how do you know? You still won't know unless you do it. Of course, you can accept that. So our process here is that, yes, we're accepting something that comes from a perfect source, and because we get knowledge from a perfect source, we get perfect knowledge. And you have no alternative. Now here's a classical example. I say it's classical because it comes from our acharyas. That, how do you know who your father is? You ask your mother. You want to argue about it? How are you going to argue? She's the only authority. There's no other authority. So similarly, how do you want to know in terms of who the Creator is? You have to accept His word for it. You have to accept, we accept the Mother as being actually the Scripture. And there's no other way. Say, oh no, this is blind knowledge. Well, it's not any more blind than this is. But you may find that the experiment becomes much more wholesome and much more comprehensive and verifies a lot more things than what's going on in the scientific circle. Because we're starting off from a different attitude. We're not starting off from the attitude of arrogance. I can know everything. Just, Prabhupada would say, kick them in the face with a boot. I can know everything. You start off with, I don't know anything. And that's the way you get knowledge. If there were teachers in here, what do you do to a student who stands up and tells you, I know everything? You just sit down and be quiet. You don't know anything, you just listen to me. Well, that's how you learn, when you don't know anything. When you start off with the idea that I know everything, you're already at a setback, because you don't have the right attitude. And especially, I'm not going to get into that, but that would be a whole different presentation. Receiving spiritual knowledge, and actually even receiving knowledge, period, is case sensitive. It depends on your consciousness. your parents, even though they may not be teachers. But parents know that when children are receptive to hearing something, when they're in the mood to hear, when they're open, then you can teach them. And when they shut off, then nothing comes across. So similarly with learning, similarly with real knowledge, unless you have the right attitude, you're already missing out on a lot of what you could actually understand otherwise. So now we're going to ask the Bhagavad Gita. Scripture is considered to be the mother, and ultimately it's the Word of God. This approach is nothing novel. Islam, Christianity, every religion has this same basis, that Scripture is the Word of God, God is perfect, and if you want knowledge of a perfect, complete, inconceivable source, then you have to take that knowledge from Him, because we're limited by these defects. And we're going to go, something got cut out. We'll find out in a minute what got cut out. He's the maintainer of everything. Krishna maintains everything. Source, oh, there it is. See? And perfect. Okay, so now here we have our scribe. We're going to be going over these points quickly.
Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Preposition, Krishna is the cause of everything, the source of life, above demigods, source of Brahman, origin of Vishnu, absolute truth, purpose of the Vedas, appears in a spiritual form, never impersonal, the Supreme Person, confirmed by authorities and conclusion.
Okay, these will be the topics we're going to try to touch, and as you're all such good listeners, we'll try to get through all of these in time. So here's and all of these will be quotes from the Bhagavad Gita. You'll see that they don't go in the actual order of verses in the Gita, but they're actually in the order of presenting these different statements in relationship to Krishna's identity. And these answer certain questions that come up, especially from those who are conversant with Vedic culture, Indian culture. And we started off with this, which is Krishna speaking about himself.
I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts.
So here Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhava, matas sarvam pravartate. He repeats this word sarvam. Sarvam means everything. He says, I am the source of everything. We're going to go through something that talks about everything, some of the things that are included in the word everything. But, and I was speaking a few days back with the ladies group, everything means everything. It's not, well, everything except this. Sanskrit language is very specific, it's very clear, and it's very perfect. That's what it means, perfect. So when Krishna says, I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds, everything emanates from me, he's making that statement, that whatever other concepts we have of creation, of creator, of God, and especially those who have connection with Indian culture, there are many conceptions, or should I say misconceptions, about God. So this is our proposition, and we're going to see whether we can actually verify this. Is this actually the case? This second part is actually the consequence of the first. So if Krishna is that, then one engages in devotional service and worship Krishna with their heart. Now, here where Krishna makes, and it's very interesting, there's Of course, Bhagavad Gita is quite sutric. Sutric means it's quite abbreviated. It's really condensed knowledge. But Krishna is talking about his relationship to us in terms of the world that we live in. You go?
I enter into each planet and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs.
When Krishna here says I, it means Krishna's potencies, Krishna's energies. But Krishna says, I enter into each planet and by my energy they stay in orbit. This is interesting science. What is gravity? Krishna here is saying that gravity is actually Krishna's attractive feature. Now in one sense that's nothing new, because what does Krishna mean? Krishna means he's all attractive. So usually we take that in a devotional sense, but he's not only all attractive, he's also the one who's drawing this to go down, if I let it go. So Krishna is also this attractive feature of Krishna in its more energetic form or impersonal sense is actually the law of gravity. And without the law of gravity, we'd be in trouble. Okay, and he says, and I become the moon and supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Well, I don't know how much juice there's in the vegetables that you get, because they're coming from all over the world. But if you come to visit Hungary, New Bajadam, then you see that the vegetables that we eat are a few yards away from where you eat it, or at least they grow a few yards away from where you eat it. And actually the taste, the rasa that comes in vegetables, here Krishna points out, that actually comes from the moonshine. So Krishna here says, I'm sustaining, I'm giving this rasa, I'm giving this energy to life. He says, what about the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities? And as you get older, that fire gets a little weaker and weaker. So, but that's also Krishna's potency. That's also Krishna's energy. It's one of the agni. It's one of the fire that's within the body and that helps us to actually digest. And he says, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. So this is really quite relevant, because it talks about now not something just spiritual, but we're talking about something very concrete. How we live, how we eat, the food that we eat, how we digest the food, how we're standing on this planet. It's all by Krishna's grace. So remember, sarva, we're talking about everything. Now we're talking about gravity, we're talking about the food that we eat. All right, now there are also controllers of these things. And I think you're all aware of demigods. Indra, Chandra, Shiva, Ganesh, and so on. So there are so many universal controllers which sort of in Christian theology generally fall into the category of angels, although not necessarily so clearly. Angels don't really take the roles of controllers of universal functions, but usually they're like messengers of God. However, in Vedic culture, we have a very clear idea in terms of the management of the universe is that, and of course Upanishads say that, Natasya karyam karanam suvidati. God does nothing. This idea of God working for 7 days it doesn't work. He does nothing, but he gets others to do the work for him. So he manifests. Both he manifests his own personal forms, he manifests his energies, and he empowers other living entities like our Brahma to be actually a secondary creator. So now, what about the position of these demigods? Because thanks to your Shankaracharya, I shouldn't say your Shankaracharya, he's our Shankaracharya, because he's Lord Shiva, he sort of poisoned the mind of everyone in the Indian subcontinent very successfully. And so we have this idea that it's all one. Krishna, Shiva, Rama, all the other demigods, they're all really in the same category. They're the expression of some type of higher spiritual, impersonal principle. But Krishna is saying something different. Now, what does Krishna say about the demigods?
Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages.
So just an important thing here, and when we talk about sages, we're talking about Prajapatis, we're talking about personalities like Vyasadeva, but Krishna is saying, I'm the source of the demigods. Remember, he said, Aham sarvasya prabhava, I'm the origin of everything. So if he's the source of them, you can't be equal to them. That means that they're dependent on him. And of course, there's this whole concept is something that we don't have time to get into. But when Krishna says that they don't know my origin or opulences, in other words, if someone doesn't know your personality, your nature, they're in a completely different category. They're in a subordinate category. So Krishna says, no one, not the demigods, not the great sages, know my origin and opulence, because I'm their source. So when you become the cause of something, the cause is always greater than the product. And either in a manifest or unmanifest state, all the ingredients which are there in the product are also there in the source, but in a greater degree and in greater quality. So here, when we talk about demigods, well, isn't Lord Shiva the same as Krishna ultimately? Well, the answer is no, because Krishna is saying, no, I'm their source, and they don't know me. I know them, but they don't know me. So that means they're not the same. That means they're different. So it's just like saying, are the father and the son different? Is the son and the same as the father? No. But here Krishna says, yes, I'm the father and they're the son. So when Lord Brahma stole the cows and the cowherd boys from Krishna, and ultimately he saw his the fault that he had actually made, and so he brought them all back. And he asked for forgiveness. So here was Brahma with his four heads, the sub-creator of the universe, and here was Krishna, who was just a 5-year-old boy. But Brahma is praying to Krishna. He said, you have to forgive me because you're my father. So even though Krishna appeared as a 5-year-old boy, but still Brahma recognized, yes, you're my father. And same thing, historically, when we go through this and study Shastra, we always see that neither Brahma, nor Shiva, nor, of course, we'll also get to Vishnu and others, no one considers themselves in the same category as Krishna. What we think is one thing, what they think is something else. So if we want the truth, we should know what they say. Okay, now, here's a very important verse.
And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness.
Now back to Sripad Shankaracharya, who preached, gave a certain interpretation of Vedic literature, in which he described that the identity of living entities is one, and that the goal of life, or that liberation, is actually to enter into a homogeneous oneness, which is actually the origin not just of us, but actually also of all demigods and even all incarnations that appear. So just briefly, his philosophical approach is that Brahman manifests this ignorance or this Maya, which is separate from Brahman, which has two aspects, limited and unlimited. And when Maya is limited, that's us, little living entities, and when Maya is unlimited, then that's Vishnu or Krishna or Ramachandra and so on. But ultimately, both of them are products of ignorance, and true enlightenment means to recognize that there's no difference between any of us, and that ultimately we are just part, well, not really part, because when you enter you no longer become part, but that we are like water molecules that enter into the ocean, and that then the water molecules lose their identity then just becomes ocean. It's a pretty far-fetched philosophy. Sane people don't accept it, but because Lord Shiva is very powerful in terms of his preaching, therefore he was very convincing in his presentation. And it isn't that he made it up. There is such a thing as Brahman. So Bhagavatam begins, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaneti Satyate. So there are three aspects of absolute truth. One is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is the localized Paramatma, or the Super Soul, who's in the heart of everyone. And the third is this impersonal energy, just like Krishna says, by my energy. This is Brahman, in the ultimate issue. So, but the question is, which is the origin? Is this Brahman the origin, or is the Supreme Personality of Godhead the origin? Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaneti Shabdati. So here, Krishna makes it very clear, I am the basis, aham. Aham sarva, excuse me, Brahmano hi pratishta aham. So again, Krishna says aham, pratishta. Pratishta means to rest. He says, I'm the rest, I'm the basis of this Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal. So Krishna is saying that, yes, I'm the source of Brahman. So back to the beginning, aham sarvasya prabhava, Krishna says, I'm the source of everything. He's source of the demigods. He's the source of our life, how we're living, and he's also the source of Brahman. Next.
But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe.
This concludes the 10th chapter and becomes actually the introduction to the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is the universal form. Arjuna wants to know about how does Krishna manifest his different opulences within this world. So Rama Shastra Vihanaham, he says, I am Lord Ramachandra, I am of wielders of weapons, I am Ram. And he says of aquatics, I'm the shark. So, but Krishna says, but what's the point? He says, actually, all of these perfections are just simply a small aspect of, he says, a single fragment of myself. Arjuna wants to know, what is that single fragment? And he said, can you show me that single fragment? And that's how the 11th chapter starts, and then Krishna manifests the universal form. So here we see that Krishna then, and then ultimately Arjuna sees this universal form, and in this universal form, he sees, universal form also means that this is actually the form of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, this is the Mahapurusha. So he sees this extraordinary feature of Krishna, which has thousands of heads and thousands of arms, in which it's a very interesting, just one statement, and some of these statements of Bhagavad Gita are extremely interesting to penetrate. Arjuna said that, no, there was Sanjaya saying that any one place that he looked, he could see everything in every place. So just now, right now, if I want to see this room, I have to look around. But here he's saying, if I just look at 1 square inch of this floor, I can see the whole room. So he said, just by looking at one place, he could see everything. But everything that he saw was going in all directions. And ultimately, sort of the expansive scope became too much for Arjuna. He couldn't really take it in. And so he asked Krishna, now you please show me your original form. Then Krishna shows him, show me your four-armed form. And he shows his four-armed form. And then he shows the two-armed form. So all of this shows again, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. Krishna then becomes the origin of the universal form. He's the origin of Lord Vishnu. He's the origin of Krishna's four-armed Narayana. The four-armed Narayana form, that is also, Krishna is the origin of that. So, I remember a long time ago, or some time ago, there used to be Guru Maharaj. Now, there's always, India's like, you ever go to, if you go to a lake where there's no flowing water, in Canada there's a lot of these, and all the leaves fall into the water and they settle to the bottom, and then sort of they start to rot under there, and gas comes up and it sort of percolates. I don't know, methane or whatever it is that comes up. So India's like that. You get all these stinky gurus percolating up on a regular basis, coming up with all kinds of idiotic philosophies about life instead of just repeating what's in the Bhagavad Gita. And this was one. This was Guru Maharaji. And his followers used to, because they were very popular at that certain point when, in the 70s and early 80s, his followers used to say, yes, Guru Maharaj, he can also show the universal form. The Prabhupada's reply was, well, all right, Krishna showed the universal form so everyone could see it, so why doesn't he show it? If he can manifest the form, he could show the form. Of course, no one ever saw it. That was plain for everyone to see. And I remember once before I joined the temple, it was one of the last things that turned me off from them. I went to this big presentation, and in the middle of it, devotee, when they had the question period, the devotee stood up and he started to say, if it wasn't he who was giving the presentation, it was one of his sadhus, he says, if Guru Maharaj is God, and he can show universal form, then we want to see it. Has he ever shown it? Has anyone ever seen it? They escorted him out. It's the devotee Ishan Das, who I got to know afterwards. Okay, so Krishna is also the source of the universal forms. Now, Krishna now, he says, yes, I am the supreme absolute truth. And in terms of the Sanskrit, minus the diacritics,
Mattaha parataram nanyam kinchit asti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre manigana eva. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread.
It's so beautiful. So Krishna is making this statement. He says, Mata parataram na anya. There is no truth superior to me. So whether it's the source of our maintenance, whether we're talking about demigods, we're talking about other Vishnu Tattva, anything, sages, whatever there is that exists, nothing is superior to Krishna, and nothing is independent of him. It's like Sutre Mani Ganaiva. He said, just like you take a string of pearls, the string is there, the pearls are dependent on the string. So Krishna says, I'm just like that. Which has different implications, because when you look at a string of pearls, you don't see the string. But without the string, the pearls fall apart. So similarly, we may not see Krishna everywhere and in everything, but he is what is holding everything together. And that's why that makes him the absolute truth.
I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas.
So when we submit ourselves to this avaroha panta, this descending process of knowledge, and we actually want to study the Vedic literature. And ultimately, Veda means knowledge. So if we really, of course, Vedic literature is explicit. All knowledge ultimately leads to Krishna. Whatever it is that you do, even this computer technology, all right, we got these great computers, but who made computers? An intelligence makes a computer. Therefore, it leads us to think that all other things that have this type of organization, capability, power, and so on, there should be an intelligence behind it somewhere. And even if we think that sometime in the future, robots are going to make robots who are going to make other robots so that people can do nothing, but it was some human being, some intelligent being who started it all off somewhere. So, but when we're coming back to the Vedas, Vedic literatures, whether it's the four Vedas, it's the Upanishads, it's the Samhitas, it's the Puranas, it's Mahabharata, any Vedic literature. Madhvacharya says, Veda Ramayanaschaiva, Bharata, Adyantavanta, beginning, middle, and end, Harisarvatra Giyate. Whatever you study in the Vedic literatures, ultimately the beginning, middle, end, every verse, sometimes directly, but sometimes indirectly. Harisarvatra Giyate. It's always telling this. It's always leading to this. It's always directing. And therefore Krishna says, by all the Vedas, I am to be known. This is the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas is to lead us to Krishna. But sometimes it's doing it directly, and sometimes it's doing it indirectly. Unfortunately, in this age, indirect things tend to immediately get us lost. Even direct things we get lost, what to speak of indirect things. So we need to hear the direct teachings, and that's why the emphasis of the Vedas in this age is Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's no misunderstanding. Although it's amazing that aside from that, so many people still misunderstand the Bhagavad Gita. So now here Krishna is presenting his, because we become a little confused and rightfully so, because we're very small creatures and Krishna is unlimited. But now we're just not talking about Krishna as a concept or Krishna as someone that's far away, but Krishna who appeared in this planet 5,000 years ago. And what is it? What is that body? And who is that form? What is that form that Krishna manifests?
Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
So here Krishna is making a statement. He says, I'm unborn. That gentleman isn't here who was asking yesterday. We're also unborn. Our bodies are born. Our souls are unborn. But Krishna is unborn. He says, and he has a transcendental body. God, when we're talking about Krishna, we're not talking about something impersonal. We're talking about something personal, and persons are not unembodied. Persons have form. So he also has a form. But he says the form is transcendental. It's a different form. People become extremely confused when we're just sort of introducing this concept of God. God is a person. And then immediately thinks, well, he's a person, and I'm so God's like me. No, it's not like this. But he's a supreme person, supreme personality of Godhead. We don't have experience with supreme persons. We have experience with sort of ordinary people like us. But he has a transcendental body. What's a transcendental body? It's a spiritual body, but it's more than spiritual. It's unlimited. But unlimited, something sort of stick in mind, even though, my memory is quite selective. But when I was a young devotee, I remember arguing with a person about the middle-sized dimension of Krishna. We're middle-sized. This is a term that Vedas use. We're neither atomic and we're neither universal in dimension. We're sort of middle-sized. So this man was saying, God is great. And God is so, you can't see God because He's so great that He's so big that you can't get far away enough from Him to see Him. If something's very big, you're standing at the foot of the mountain, you can't see the mountain because it's so big. What to speak of with God? So how can you ever get far enough away to see God? Therefore, no one can actually see God because He's so great. The transcendental body is different. In Brahma Samhita, one of our texts, it says, Andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam. This says that Krishna is the source of everything. Everything comes from Krishna. At the same time, everything is within Krishna. So, whatever is outside of Krishna is also inside of Krishna's body. Simultaneously, Andantarasta and Paramanu. Paramanu means an atom. Similarly, Krishna is in every atom. But because Krishna is in every atom, every universe that's also in Krishna is also in every atom. Right? So the atoms make up the universe, but the same universe is inside every atom by dint of everything being within Krishna. It's confusing. I'm not trying to clarify it because it's inconceivable. We can't figure something like that out. I can't say right now that I'm inside this room, but this room is inside of me. And you're all inside of me either. But for Krishna, it's like that. He has no inside, no outside. He has no beginning, He has no end. So that was when Mother Yashoda tied him. This is Damodar Desh, when Krishna is tied by Damodar. That's one of the principles. You can't tie him down because you can't find anything long enough to tie him, but even if you did, he has no outside. This body's got an outside. It's an ever-increasing outside, but it's got an outside. Krishna has no outside, and He has no inside. But still, He has a form. He has features. That's called transcendental body, and this is called achintya. It's inconceivable. So, when Krishna appears in this world, even though this world is inside of Him, He appears in the world, never deteriorates, and He says, He's the source of everything. He appears, Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. He says, I appear in my original transcendental form. Krishna was not a human. He was not manifest by any type of inferior or any type of spiritual energy. He just manifests Sambhavami. I just manifest by my own potency. So that's who Krishna is when Krishna appears, and that's who Lord Ramachandra is who appeared. Some ungainly person was making some comments here recently about Lord Ramachandra. And no, but he's transcendental. And He's transcendental, and everything that He does is transcendental. Our perception of things tends to be not so spiritual. Okay, but people think, no, He came from some type of more superior energy, but Krishna says something to the contrary.
Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme.
So it's self-explanatory. No, it isn't that there was some superior spiritual potency that manifests itself as Krishna so that we could relate to it, and then Krishna again went back and became nothing or some kind of homogeneous energy. So, and therefore, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person.
So when Krishna says he's the greatest, this is not like Muhammad Ali saying, I'm the greatest. This is, Krishna is the greatest, and that's why we're trying to point out that he is what he says he is, namely, and once again, there's the fallible, that's us, those who tend to make mistakes and who have these defects, and then there are infallible living entities. Krishna is not even infallible, because if you say he's infallible, there's a question of fallibility. So he says, I'm beyond the fallible and the infallible. He says, and I'm celebrated both in this world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. Oops. Now, Krishna is just talking about himself. Now, we get some further evidence. This is also part of the scientific process. Did anyone else come to this particular conclusion that Krishna came to?
Arjuna said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala and Vyasa confirm this truth about you, and now you yourself are declaring it to me.
So Arjuna is saying, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. He said, what you're just saying here is already something that others have said. And these are authorities. But who said it? Who said it? The Vyas. Well, I don't know who Vyas is, but that's our problem. I know who Einstein is, but who's Einstein? Ask Vyas, who's Einstein? What's the importance of Einstein? But these are actually spiritual scientists, perfect people of perfect caliber, who don't make mistakes, who aren't an illusion, who are above any type of cheating, who have personally performed these experiments and realized all the truths of the Vedas, concluding with Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And now Arjuna also comes to that conclusion, yes. And it's not just because I'm your friend, Arjuna's Krishna's friend, I'm flattering you, but he's saying, yes, this is the truth itself. And now we'll conclude with a conclusion, which was also there in the beginning.
Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. So
this concept of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is important because it's if you know this, then what do? Then you serve Krishna. But if you don't know this, or you have doubts about this, then one will not be able to take the next step, which is actually the process of self-realization, or understanding what my relationship is with Krishna. Therefore, we need to have a deep understanding of Krishna's divinity before actually proceeding forward in the process of devotional service. So there are, and I will, well, okay, I'll make this is the last one, and then I'm going to stop. We started a little late, so that's why we're ending a little late. And here are three basic divisions of Vedic literature and progress in spiritual life. They are called Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So Sambandha is what Krishna is talking about over here. Understanding Krishna's position, what our relationship is with Krishna. This is, what is my relationship? And once we have this knowledge, then we start off with engaging in devotional service. Then it's the practice, with the idea of ultimately achieving this goal. These are common things that are there in every effort in the world. You want to have some kind of, you want to be successful in life, okay, then you have a profession. What type of profession? Well, that's the Sambandha. Then you go ahead, and once you've actually acquired the knowledge and you've got your diploma, then you become successful, and then the Prayojana is that then you can go twice a year to Krishna Valley and have a break, and do so many other things, so that then becomes the fruit. So, Sambandha Avideya Prayojana. Here, this is the Sambandha. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, and he really knows everything, because Krishna is everything. So, Avideya then follows. He therefore engages in devotional service. So, we'll stop there, and tomorrow we're going to talk about Bhakti as the topmost yoga with which to reach Krishna. And I'm just going to stop, and if you have any short questions before we're going to have some prasadam. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.